It can either enhance and complement the message and maintain an illusion, or it can be out of place, clash, distract, destroy the illusion, or alter the meaning. The videotape producer must control everything that is to appear in the picture. This means not only the talent, his makeup and his costume, but also the background, the setting, and the props which are used. The magic of videotape has to be preceded by a lot of planning, a lot of legwork, a lot of preparation, for which there is no easy substitute. Anything can be in your picture. Anything you can imagine can be created for the camera's eye. The world's your stage, if you can get it ready by 9 a.m. tomorrow.
Let's shoot at Charlie's restaurant.
I think we should build a set.
Look, why don't we just move some pictures around or something?
Listen, some seamless paper, a few spotlights.
Let's shoot at Charlie's restaurant.
Rule number 1, use available locations. If you need an office background, use a real office. With today's VTR equipment, it's easy to go on location with our suitcase studio. However, for professional results, we have to watch out for things that may work against us. Let's say we want to explain a simple office procedure. It's all right here, but let's scout our location. This desk is in front of all these other desks where other people will be working during the day, typing, phones, and a lot of background movement. With our portable lighting equipment, we would have a hard time lighting the background area. So for all these reasons, we may decide to move our action back to a desk that's a little secluded. This corner area will add dimension to our picture and make it a lot more interesting. Windows like this can cause us grief with lighting, where we're fighting to balance inside light with daylight, or at night they act like mirrors, so it's best to avoid them. Let's also look at our power availability to service our lights and equipment. We may have to run lines from other areas, or even use a portable generator. When putting up our lights on a location set, we have to be cautious. Quartz lights are very hot and can easily char ceiling tiles, set fire to drapes and flammables, as well as setting off sprinkler systems that will bring unplanned excitement. If we're recording sound on our location set, we may have to cushion our set to take out the sound bounce from a hard room, or to soften outside sounds, street noises, walking noises. Stand on the location for 5 minutes and listen. If the sound is from air conditioning, can it be turned off? How about classroom bells or a page system? All of these normal sounds may be okay, but while scouting the location is the time to find out. If in pre-planning we decide a certain location might be best, our scouting will let us know what technical problems we may encounter. While we're here, we can see that most locations need a little housekeeping. When it's time to videotape, the furniture may look better at a slight angle, and a shoot-by piece in the foreground gives depth. Most desks have too many attractions on them. Our program is the thing. The setting is just that, a place to present our program from, so it's usually best to keep it simple. Other things might be brought from nearby areas to enhance the effect, or special props might be brought in. If you can use an existing location, well and good, but for various reasons, technical and practical, you may decide during planning or scouting that you need a more controlled situation, a studio. This may be a real studio which you have available, or a large, special, quiet room which you can set up temporarily to be used as a studio. Let's look at some of the simple and abstract things which we can do to create an illusion or a mood when we have full control over the shooting area. Using lights, we can add patterns and shadows to create a background interest, or perhaps to give us a theme. Masonite is a good material to cut these patterns from. A bare bulb gives a sharper image. And remember, not too close to the lamp. We don't want our cutout to burn. We can move in an object to add to the background picture, or add more in a freestanding piece cut from foam core, Upson board, or cardboard. Keep checking the picture on the monitor. Add just enough to set the scene, not to dominate it. No seam paper used in window displays can give us a fast background and color change. It's 9 feet wide and 36 feet long and will tape up to our walls easily. Silver duct tape is especially good for almost any taping job. This gives us a background. Now we add a couple of chairs and a coffee table for interest, as well as a home base to keep things on, and we have a simple set. The floor may need a little treatment, like carpet, or maybe just a couple of lines with colored tape to add perspective. Our people complete the picture and should never have to fight for attention with the set. Busy backgrounds, plants growing out of heads, and other pitfalls can be easily avoided by watching the monitor. While you're looking, make sure we have enough set so we're not overshooting it. You may have to add a small flat, and a color change may help to make it look deliberate. If our talent is to show the viewer anything, make sure he has a place for it, a comfortable location that he can use as home base. It will make him feel at ease and make it easy to light and be picked up by our cameraman. When we're working in an area like this, we can let our ideas run. Platforms will change floor levels. We can add color for mood. We can get as complicated as we want. But don't forget, we're striving for a simple look that won't distract. It's important to plan all set and prop construction to avoid extra work. Artist sketches, layouts, models, and blueprints may help plot the action and simplify the whole job in the long run. Colors and brightness of all objects in the pictures should fall within the range of the TV camera. Remember to allow for the colors of your talent's clothes. No blacks, no whites, no large sparkly objects, no fine patterns which might vibrate. And most important, avoid the same color as the background. Flesh tones look best with shades of blue behind them. Planning is especially important if we decide to construct a hard set. As most surface materials come in 4x8 sheets, for economy and handling, it's best to work in that format. We can use plywood, Upson board, Masonite, foam core, vinyl board. Theatrical scenery flats are usually painted muslin on a framework for ease in moving and storing. Vacuum-formed plastic wall sections are also available in a variety of patterns. Unlike the theater, our cameras bring the viewer into the set, and if we want realism, we must build with a dimension. Flats for a hard set are usually framed with 1x2s or 1x3s, with a cross brace and corner blocks. Properly built framing can have the surface material replaced over and over. Flats of this type can be nailed, bolted, or held together with lash lines. Braces and sandbags can keep them from falling over. In placing our flats, a set with a corner is not only interesting, but is also self-standing. Working doors and windows need extra strong construction to prevent the walls from shaking. You probably will also need some kind of background for when the door is opened, or a view to see through the window. We can create interest in a long wall by adding a jog to simulate the normal turns and coves in real construction. This can also be the start of a drape area. When the drapes are in place, our mind assumes that there's a window behind. Simple framing covered with plastic brick gives us not only the texture, but the warmth of a fireplace. Placement of furniture is dictated by our script so we can avoid awkward crossings. Sometimes you can rent furniture from office supply firms for a small % of cost. It might save a lot of scrounging around as they'll deliver and pick up. Now that we have our basics in place, it's important to dress our set with props. Pictures should be selected for size, color, and feeling for the type of mood we're trying to create. Watch out for pictures or any props that command too much attention. Plants fill corners nicely, but watch the monitor to make sure they don't grow out of the talent's head. Hanging pieces help create believability, but don't let them upstage the talent. Dress the rest of the set with just enough to make it believable and not overpowering. A set that doesn't work is worse than no set at all. And speaking of working, if you need appliances that work, like a sink or shower with running water, you can rig a temporary setup by connecting to some nearby outlet. For many situations, for many scripts, a realistic setting is not appropriate. Sometimes no background is desirable. Or a stylized, abstract background sets the proper mood. These types of settings are challenges to your imagination to produce something appropriate and striking using inexpensive, readily available materials and as quickly and simply as possible. A fog can be made by blocking off an area and then pouring hot water over dry ice. A wallpaper steamer might be of some help in moving the fog where you want it. Sometimes a set is needed to satisfy special functions of display and demonstration. With a hook and loop board, prepared artwork can be moved around spontaneously. A turntable lets you display objects from all sides. Flip cards help assure that photographs and artwork will appear in the correct order and will be well framed. A reveal board is a visually exciting way to introduce new subjects. Rear screen projection can introduce visuals that help to build your set. Of course, the same effect can be achieved by other means, such as electronic keying or front projection. Sometimes, special effects are required. We may have to create a snowstorm. With plastic snow, it's easy. Or rain. A plastic drop cloth or child swimming pool comes in handy here. Lightning completes the picture with sound effects. In addition to the normal sets, props, and special effects, you may need special props of a wide variety. Scale models, working models, oversized demonstrators, special visual aids, trick props, and special effects materials like smoke or fog. Sometimes these can be rented from a theater supply or effects company, but more commonly you'll have to have them specially built. There can be no particular rules for these special props. Whatever will do the job. The planning, building, and use of sets and props can be a real challenge to the imagination and an exercise in ingenuity. We can do a lot with a little, like in this set. Foam core can be made self-standing and can be easily moved. Much of the set is painted, and some of the objects are carved out of styrofoam. Even furniture that is in a darkly lit background area can be profiled from cardboard and painted. As a matter of fact, most of this set is in your imagination. And in your studio, your imagination can create almost anything. With Videotape, the world's your stage, the world of your imagination. Remember your first videotape job? The excitement, the fun? There you were, doing it all yourself, really making an impression. Then the jobs got harder, more complicated, more important. Other people became involved, and the novelty wore off. Now you've been given a complex production to do, and it could be a good show. But what should you be doing to make it great? What kind of things do you need to know? How can you keep from going over your head and still get it done well and on time? It's been left in your lap, and now you've got to produce. As producer, you're personally responsible for making everything happen, for gathering a bunch of things and people and video equipment and putting it all together to make a show. But before you get pushed into moving too fast, you'd better slow down and follow the 3 logical steps to an efficient, effective, enjoyable method of videotape production. Plan what has to be done and how you want to do it. Prepare everything you'll need, and with everyone who has anything to do with the production. Then produce, but only after you're thoroughly satisfied that everything and everyone is ready to go when you roll the tape. It all should start right here in a meeting room, long before you turn on a camera or roll an inch of tape. Because before you can coordinate and produce a videotape that does the job, you have to decide just what it is that your program should communicate. You begin to plan by finding out what it is you're supposed to accomplish, what specific objectives the program must achieve if it's on target. Sometimes this is simple, like demonstrating how to run a certain piece of equipment. And sometimes it's more complex, like trying to create an image of social responsibility for a corporation. You also must find out about your audience. Before you can inform, educate, persuade, or even entertain anyone, you have to know who'll be seeing your program. Find out how much they know about your subject and what attitude they have about it. Knowing your audience will also help you find the tone of voice your program should have, the kind of sophistication or lack of it that you should aim for, even the kinds of words and pictures you should use. And before you can get started, you'll also have to know some things about the real-world problems you'll be facing, your practical limitations. First, you'll need to know the level of equipment you'll be working with. If your VTR can edit, you can shoot out of sequence or add scenes to your tape after it's done. 2 cameras and a switcher will let you shoot longer scenes, give you a wider choice of camera angles, or allow you to shoot the whole show in one take. If you plan to distribute copies of your finished program, be sure your master recorder will allow for sharp, stable transfers. When going on location, be sure your gear is designed for portability and can be serviced or replaced in the field. You'll need to know things like how much power your lights draw, how close your zoom lens will focus, which colors your camera will reproduce faithfully, 100 tidbits of practical information that may affect your method of production. Next, you'll have to consider the capabilities of your people. You should be aware of what each can and cannot do, how responsible and dependable they are, and how much time each has free. If you're using inexperienced hands, it's wise to have someone who's been there before to guide them. Also, having a technical consultant on the subject matter may save you from making embarrassing mistakes. The quality of your finished tape depends to a large extent on your finding and properly utilizing the talents of your production people. A third type of production problems are the legal questions which may come up, especially if your program is to be sold or distributed widely. If you're using music, you'll have to get copyright clearance. There are a number of good music libraries. You buy the records or tapes and then pay a royalty fee each time you use a selection in your production. If you're hiring professional talent, be sure you don't infringe on union regulations in your area. The talent can usually tell you about conditions of employment, or check with their agent, or with the union office. To be safe, it's a good idea to get releases from everyone that is recognizable who appears or is heard in your program. This includes people in photographs or films that are used in your show. With children, get the releases signed by a parent. Don't forget to get permission to shoot if you're on private property. And police cooperation in public places is a smart idea. Finally, before you can begin production, you must know the budget limits. How much time you have and how much money to work with, how far that money will go, what you're expected to deliver for the money, and how soon, and what help you can expect from a sponsor in the way of materials, props, consultants, shipping, and other tangible contributions. Understanding the budget situation will give you an idea of how ambitious your project can be, or, as is usually the case, how thrifty and inventive you'll have to be. Could be you'll have to just grab a portable recorder and shoot it all by yourself, after all. After considering all of these real-life problems and possible limitations to your production effort, you're ready to make plans for how to use the production elements. These are the ingredients that you as a producer must add together and manipulate to come up with a program. To put them all together, you must have a working knowledge of what each of these elements can and can't do. You may, on the simplest production, do all the work yourself as a kind of one-man band. However, with a complex production, and if your budget allows, you may need skills for writing, for art, titles, and graphics, for set building, for performing, for music, for obtaining, running, and maintaining the cameras and recorders, for lighting, for locating props, for taking care of any special requirements of your show, such as finding locations or building visual aids. And you'll need a director with the talent to take all of these elements and skills and turn them into a show. If you're lucky, you'll know people who can wear several hats. Your job as producer is to know what each of the elements can do and at what cost. Then you can decide what skills your show needs and bring together the right combination of people to do the job, but not to start shooting. You've got a lot more planning to do first. Your next step is to find a format, a way of presenting your story which will juggle all of the previously mentioned factors, the objectives, the audience, the limitations, and the production elements, and come up with a way of presenting your material that's most effective and efficient. Here are some of your alternatives and the reasons you might choose one format or the other. Sometimes a straightforward presentation of the facts is not only the simplest, but the best approach. Make use of the medium by showing and explaining at the same time, using the on-camera presenter to handle introductions, summaries, and abstractions. Do you have available a recognized expert on your subject whose presence and opinion would lend interest and authority? If you're trying to demonstrate something, how it works, how to use it, how to fix it, how to almost anything, then build your script around demonstrations. Perhaps incorporate interviews with experts or users or people with opposing viewpoints. Or plan on documentary-type coverage of real events. Is there stock footage available, movies or slides, or other source material in a library or file? Skits or role-playing dramatizations can be effective, especially in training programs where you're trying to illustrate the right or wrong way to do something, or change an attitude. Use charts and graphs and titles and artwork to help explain and organize complex material. A light-hearted comical approach might work well. particularly if the subject matter tends to get dull and dry, or if you're talking to a young audience. Or is your subject controversial? Maybe you need a roundabout approach to make the viewer lower his defenses, to give the new idea a chance. Try a bit of entertainment, a disarming presenter, a panel discussion, pantomime, dance, background music, or a musical jingle. Any format you dream up probably can be made to work. Common sense will tell you which format or combination of formats will make the best vehicle, and which techniques would be hard or easy for your production group. Working with your writer or your director, you'll pick the best approach. Planning is almost complete, but you've got one more task: scheduling. As producer, you're the traffic cop who keeps the entire production moving, making certain that everything and everyone is available and ready at the right time, getting estimates for all expenses, and keeping tabs so you don't go over budget, and setting deadlines and making sure that they're met. That's the way to plan. Now it's time to prepare. So when the shooting starts, there'll be no delays waiting for a missing prop, no arguments on how to proceed. Where do you begin? Well, you can't have a program without a script. So you begin by working with your writer. He should know the subject or know videotape production techniques, preferably both. Tell him about the objectives in the audience and the limitations you'll have, as well as the elements and the format that you think are appropriate, and let him do his thing. Then help him rewrite until you feel the subject is well covered and you have a script that's producible. The script needs to be right. It's your best form of communicating with everybody involved. Next, you'll need the director. Very often the producer is also the director, and that may be your situation. If not, however, you should involve the director as early in the project as possible. He can help with all the arrangements and the artistic decisions. And when it comes time to videotape, the director takes over. He's the expert in handling the practical problem of getting shooting done. He knows what the equipment will do and how to get the most out of the production crew. And most important, what makes a good show and how to add production values in shooting. Now that you have your script and the director, you have to find the talent. The script usually indicates the kind of talent to use. Sometimes the writer had somebody in mind as he wrote, or perhaps you or the director know people who would be right and are available. Naturally, if you can afford them, professional actors and actresses are worth the investment. They'll give you a polished performance, and because they are pros, they're able to work faster. That saves you time and trouble. A talent agency can help you find the performers most suitable to your show and make the arrangements with them. However, for some types of shows, you may not need actors. If a part calls for a demonstration, there's nobody better than people who know the thing they have to do. If your script has highly technical or specialized copy, get an expert in the field who will be comfortable with the material. Of course, for many of the simple parts, use your family, friends, and co-workers, anyone you can persuade to perform. The next step in preparing for your videotape production is to get work started on the titles and the artwork. Working with the director, you decide what's needed and then sit down with the artist to plan the arrangement, the type style, and the background for each and every piece. You should provide the artist with an exact list of everything you need. He should show you and the director rough layouts of what he plans to do. Your next job as producer is to help the director make all the arrangements for all the miscellaneous things that will be needed when it's time to shoot. Props, costumes, equipment rental, the crew, places to shoot, music, sound effects. The list seems endless. To make sure nothing is forgotten and that no extra unnecessary arrangements are made, the director goes over the script thoroughly and plans exactly what he wants to do. Sometimes the director will make up a storyboard, rough sketches that show exactly what he wants to shoot. He'll also make a list of everything he needs for each scene and ask your help in obtaining them. Out of the many phone calls will evolve a shooting schedule, when all the people and equipment and things will be able to come together. Your final step in preparing to videotape is to meet with all the people involved to make sure everyone knows what they should be doing. This pre-production meeting is also a good time to get everybody's help with those last few hard-to-locate items. Finally, it's time to shoot. Everybody knows his part, what he's supposed to bring, and what he's supposed to do. But preparation isn't over yet. Set decorations and props have to look right. The lighting has to be right. And then it's time for the talent. They talk it through, they walk it through, and when all have a pretty good idea of what the director wants to accomplish, they rehearse, with the director watching, correcting. As the producer, you try to back up the director, catch any of the details he might forget or overlook. You've planned and you've prepared. Now you're ready to produce.
Everything's set. Roll the tape.
Everything is so high. I just don't know what I'm going to do. Every week the groceries cost $5, $10 more than the week before.
The title of today's program is Inflation in the Food Industry, a topic of interest to all of us. However, before we get into the details of inflation, let's examine the food chain, the distribution chain for foods. It all starts with the farmer. Food then passes through a processor, to a wholesaler, to a retailer, and then finally to you.
Okay, cut. Let's take a look at it.
If you're editing, when each scene is finished, make sure you've got it. Even though the scene looked perfect, check it on the tape and check the edit. Never move to the next scene until you've played back and seen what you've done. And right here is where everybody in production is often faced with the toughest decision of all. The director especially, and the producer, who is ultimately responsible. Is the material acceptable? Should you be satisfied with what has been done, or try again? This agony is an occupational hazard of videotape because you and all the others can see and criticize. But as producer, you bear the final responsibility for the quality of the show. You'll make the tough decisions. You'll agree to sudden changes of plans to improve the show. You'll keep track of the expenditures. You'll face the client or sponsor if the program goes over budget or doesn't meet the objectives. And you'll sit with the audience and accept the blame and the praise for what everyone else did. What the producer does is simple enough to describe. He gets everything and everybody together so that a videotape can be made. In the process, he makes a lot of decisions which profoundly affect the program. A good producer must be able to get the best from each person involved in the show. He has to know in detail his video production tools, lighting, music, acting, writing, camera work, all the rest. And he has to know his subject matter. Yet he has to be able to ignore these details so he can objectively analyze his program's total effect. There are many kinds of shows, each with unique requirements. There are many ways to go about getting a videotape made. And there are many kinds of producers. The best ones share a common trait: responsibility for getting the job done and the satisfaction of putting it all together.
Am I on? One thing we must never forget is
well, gentlemen, as I was saying, the first thing that you have to do is always be prepared with your tools, right? And then when you're able to do that, then your presentations will always be a success.
So, as you can clearly see,
vital to every videotape production is the ability to perform in front of the camera and present the subject matter in a clear, believable, and interesting way.
well, it's all here in your notebooks, at any rate.
Am I on? One thing we must never forget is
well, gentlemen, as I was saying, the first thing that you have to do is always be prepared with your tools, right? And then when you're able to do that, then your presentations will always be a success.
So, as you can clearly see,
vital to every videotape production is the ability to perform in front of the camera and present the subject matter in a clear, believable, and interesting way.
well, it's all here in your notebooks, at any rate.
So you're going on camera. Sure, you don't want to make a fool of yourself, but more important, it's your job to make certain the message gets through. And any problems you have as a performer get in the way of that message. What can you do to turn out the best possible performance? Well, we're going to tell you. But it's not easy. There aren't any simple black and white rules. Instead, you'll find a bunch of conflicting demands, paradoxes, which require you to strike a balance in your performance. You'll have to juggle factors which are conflicting with each other and probably with your own personality. But before we get into paradoxes, let's look at the simple mechanics of doing a TV performance. Here are the basic things you are expected to know and do. If your director doesn't tell you what to wear, you should bring alternatives. In general, avoid very dark or very light clothes. Also avoid rich colors or small patterns which might vibrate. Mid-range colors are your best bet. Large jewelry could cause distracting sparkles. Extremes of clothing, hairstyle, or makeup may also distract. Makeup may be required for skin blemishes or 5 o'clock shadow, or to simply give you better skin color. But with or without makeup, stay out of the hot lights until you're needed. You'll have to walk through all your moves around the set and work out the way you'll handle all the props. This is so the cameraman and director won't be fooled. You'll have to speak normally from all positions so the sound can be set correctly. And you'll have to rehearse your lines or get used to using cue cards or a teleprompter. The floor manager, on cue from the director, will signal you when to stand by, when to begin, which camera is operating, when to speed up, when to slow down, and how much time you have left. Finally, the floor manager calls for quiet. You're standing by on your mark, waiting for your cue, and then you're on. This may be just a rehearsal, or it may be the actual program. Either way, you should give your best performance. And remember exactly what you did, so you can repeat it if necessary. Sometimes everything goes well the first time. Sometimes there are things that can be improved. So when you've completed a section, you immediately play back what you recorded, And if it's okay, you go on with the next segment. And so you proceed until your whole program is finished.
That's all fine, but I want to know how to perform. I don't want to do dumb things, and I want to be just as good as I can. Tell me what I need to know.
Well, there seems to be almost no end to the things people can do wrong. And there are dozens of ways to improve your performance. Many of these ways are common techniques for the public speaker, the salesman, the teacher, the actor. And many of them are simply common sense, like speaking clearly and being organized. But in this program, we want to concentrate on those techniques that are unique to television. You have to know what's happening and how you fit in with all the activity in the TV studio. But we want you to understand that when the studio gets quiet and the red tally light goes on, it's just you and your audience. All the machinery and all the crew members are incidental. You have to perform for your audience. And performance is a paradox. Sure, you'd like some simple rules, but effective TV performance isn't simple. It depends on your ability to combine conflicting ways of doing things. Successful performers have discovered effective ways of dealing with the paradoxes inherent in television. In this program, we're going to tell you how to be a juggler of paradoxes so you too can be an effective TV performer. So the first paradox is that all the recommendations and suggestions and rules probably have occasional successful exceptions. This is because today's audience expects anything and everything over television and will tentatively accept something just because it's new or it's strange or just because it's on TV. The reason we mention this first paradox is because your message or your personality or your particular audience could allow you to throw out the rules and still be successful as a performer.
Okay, maybe I can just be myself, but how do I make people pay attention?
Every performer faces the attention paradox, the need to be both hot and cool. Everyone involved in your production is beefing up the program in every possible way in order to maintain interest, in order to produce the very best possible show they can. The extreme result can be information overload. The production is too hot for the viewer to handle. The talent ends up force-feeding the viewer. On the other extreme is the cool approach, an effort to just relax and be informal and sort of trick the viewer into making the effort to understand and thus become more deeply involved. Trouble is, being relaxed and cool and not forcing yourself or your message on the viewer is only a shade away from being boring and dull and slow, which will turn off the viewer completely. So the paradox is this: how can the performer be hot and cool at the same time? The solution evolves out of the bigger-than-life intimacy of television. Remember, no matter how many viewers are watching a TV program, you're talking to each one individually, like I'm talking to you. As the camera brings me closer, I should interact with you on a close and intimate basis. No need to project my voice across the room like an actor or public speaker. I imagine I'm in the kitchen carrying on an interesting conversation with a friend. And that solves the paradox. As the performer, you provide the friendly, conversational, calm, and collected cool. And let the director and cameraman provide the hot.
Well, it's easy enough for you to say, be cool. But how can I be natural and relaxed when I have to stand on a mark, face a key light, look into the camera and talk into the microphone all at the same time? I can't do it. It's too much.
The third paradox, controlled spontaneity, creates an even greater dilemma for the performer. What we normally do when we communicate face-to-face, say across the table, is to use gestures and facial expressions which, if used in the same way by the television performer, would appear to be too hot. The violent movements must be controlled and toned down for TV. If I were in a face-to-face conversation with you in your living room, it would be quite normal for me to look up or down or around the room. When I do the same thing now, you wonder, what's he looking at? If I were making a speech in front of an audience, it would be quite acceptable to look down at my script. But on television, it's disconcerting. The viewer wonders what I'm looking for and sees the bald spot in the middle of my head rather than my face. Now I'm glancing at the floor manager, trying to get some cues, or I'll try to take a sneaky peek at a cue card. Again, bad news. You need to control your eye movement. Another problem, when you move around in a typical face-to-face situation, these movements are usually quite brisk. We get up, look one way or the other, reach for a book or a glass. If we move with that same speed on television, we're too hot. The camera's left behind. So you've got to control your body movements. Watch me this time. When you're on camera, hold gestures and motion to a minimum and then move in slow motion. But the trouble is, if we're too much in control, we come across as too mechanical. See what happens as I stiffen up, hold my head very still, keep my mouth in one position. Suddenly I'm not myself, I'm not relaxed. So the paradox, after you've learned how to control your movements, then you've got to allow yourself to somehow become spontaneous. I take a deep breath, kind of let my shoulders drop, let my head drop from side to side, generally try to relax. Some performers like to do calisthenics, step out of the studio for a minute, get a breath of fresh air, a drink of water. All these activities clear your mind, let you come back to face the camera relaxed, in control. Now you can quit worrying about yourself and the way you look and the hubbub of activity around you, and get tuned into the particular audience your message is aimed for, the viewer. With that viewer clearly in mind, you'll be able to speak and behave just as you would if you were face to face. You'll be natural, you'll be spontaneous.
How do you do? This is silly. I can't just talk into a lens.
The fourth paradox. How can we project friendly, responsive, human-to-human warmth to non-human, non-responsive cameras? You've got to empathize with a non-existent audience, an audience you create in your mind with certain stereotype characteristics. We've got to think of cameras as channels through which we make contact with these people. It helps some performers to visualize an actual person, a friend or a member of the family, and pretend they're talking only to that person. I develop a general feeling of humanness out there, a friendly, quiet, and warm relationship with an empathized someone reached through the camera, my messenger, my friend, my interpreter. Talking to a lens and treating a camera like a person is tough at first, strange and unnatural. But when you can do it, you'll have solved this paradox of giving a warm human performance through a machine.
Quiet!
The fifth paradox. We need to concentrate on our performance and ignore the studio activity. Yet at the same time, remain alert to information relayed to us by the floor manager or some other crew member. We can do this by developing peripheral awareness, a type of selective perception, being aware of what's going on in the studio while looking at the camera and relating to the camera. You can develop this ability with practice by talking to inanimate objects. A doorknob will do, or a spot on the wall, focusing on that point while remaining aware of other things happening in the room. People can walk back and forth in front of you, but you don't take your eyes off the spot of concentration. You can talk to the point much as you'd talk to the camera, but you'd better warn your friends and relatives first. As we've said, when you look at the camera, it's like looking at a person. The lens is the person's eyes. When you're looking at another human being, you don't stare. The same should be true with a lens.
If I have to refer to notes or read from cue cards, how can I maintain good, sincere eye contact with the camera?
The best contact will result when you can do without cue cards or a script. If you know your subject matter very well, maybe you can be extemporaneous, ad lib, be spontaneous. But if you have to use a script, you shouldn't try to hide it by being a peeker cheater. With a script, the key is to establish quality of contact when you're looking at the camera, and to learn to look down at the script where there are natural pauses, where less important material is being covered, or when the camera isn't on you. Be sure to be looking at the camera when you're on again, whenever you've changed cameras, and when you emphasize a major point. When teleprompters or cue cards are being used, they should be very close to the lens, in a position where it will be least obvious that you're reading from them.
Sometimes I talk to the camera, but sometimes I ignore it and talk to you. But when? Which is right?
The sixth paradox involves the role of the camera as a participating subject or as an objective observer. Sometimes the camera is treated like another person in the studio with us. We talk to the camera as if it were the viewer. This is called the subjective approach. With the objective approach, we ignore the camera and permit the viewer to eavesdrop. Generally, you can follow these rules. If you're delivering information, as in a news show or a demonstration, talk to the camera. If you're dramatizing, role-playing, interviewing, or being interviewed, interact with the other people in the program and ignore the camera. But with many kinds of programs, you have to do both, and that's the paradox. As the effective performer, you should shift your attention to either the camera or to the participants only after a particular thought, segment, or idea has been completed.
Finally, I've got it. It's so easy, so simple. Just you and me, one-to-one.
No, cut. Fred, you've got to be much more sincere. Now, let's try it again. I think you should.
Well, that brings us to the ultimate paradox. How can a performer strike a balance between illusion and reality? The reality is the complex circumstances of production, the studio, the technicians, the interruptions. Since all of this would interfere with your message, the illusion that has to be maintained is that none of this exists. The process of production is complex, segmented, difficult, and seldom goes as planned. Your job as performer is to create the illusion that the program being viewed is a simple, straightforward, free-flowing presentation. Well, there are the 7 general paradoxes to juggle in order for you to achieve an effective level of performance.
So that's the whole plan. But it requires everybody's cooperation, and that's where you come in. So
your performance on camera can make or break a television production. A good performance, supplemented by the technical wizardry of television production, remains the most efficient, the most exciting, and the most effective means of communicating ideas and feelings to large numbers of people.